Welcome in to the Football Guys Fantasy Football Show. Today, we're going to be talking about 32 players that NFL teams cannot stop talking about. We did this last week where we went through all 32 teams. We looked at a headline from their training camp, and you guys loved this so much that we wanted to bring it back again this week. This is not our typical podcast where we go back and forth and have long discussions. These are going to be bite-sized convos or just really even one-liners about each of these teams. So, Dave, let's just jump right into it. The Arizona Cardinals. The headline coming out of Arizona camp is that James Conner is the lead back. Well, duh. But I think the bigger thing to take from this is that Trey Benson has not been getting the glowing reports that we wanted.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, we're hearing that Amari DeMercado is still in the mix, and I think this is just like a good, the macro lesson to take away from this is like, yeah, we get so enamored by rookies, and from the NFL draft until training camp kicks off, every rookie we're just looking at in rose-colored glasses, and we're saying, this guy's going to be great, he's going to be awesome, and then the reality of the NFL hits when training camp opens, and we find out some of these rookies do need to develop a little bit. So I think there's still a good process in drafting Trey Benson because we know he could be a good player and he might see some work later in the season, and maybe James Conner can miss time. But I think this is just a reminder that the team likes James Conner and he is going to see his typical workload to start the season.
Yeah, I think we saw this in previous seasons where, when the Seahawks draft Zach Charbonnet and we say, oh, Ken Walker, it's going to be a 50-50 split. And then you see Ken Walker still goes out there and gets his work. And not that they're the exact same player or anything like that, but James Conner has been a productive guy for years and years and years. I think the whole thing here with him is that if he's hurt, the Cardinals do want to have someone else and someone for the future. So James Conner, I still think is very fantasy viable running back and actually a steal given his current ADP right now. Let's go to the next team, Atlanta Falcons. This one is going to upset a lot of people, and it's kind of upsetting me as I'm saying it, but running backs Bijan Robinson and Tyler Allgeier have been splitting first team reps. Oh my God, it's happening again, Dave. Is it happening again? It's not happening again. Please don't let it happen again.
I mean, Arthur Smith isn't there, but like Tyler Algier isn't some slouch. Like he's not just this bum that just keeps moonwalking into a workload. That's not the case here. Like this guy rushed for 1,000 yards as a rookie. He is a good running back. Obviously, Bijan Robinson, what he can do in the passing game and in the open field is desirable, and he is going to get a lot of work because of that. But it's not crazy to think that Tyler Algier is still going to be involved here. So in my rankings, I have a slight edge to Breece Head ahead of Bijan Robinson, and I'm going to keep it that way. But, there's a lot of talks this year about like Bijan Robinson or Breece. They're typically going back to back in drafts, and a lot of people are saying Breece ahead. A lot of people are saying Bijan again, but I think that's kind of one of those big decisions in your draft that could really make a huge difference if one guy ends up outscoring the other by a few points per game. So I don't think Tyler Algier is just going to disappear, and most backs are splitting work in some realm. But I think the big thing that we want to know is like who's getting the goal line touches, because this should be a much more potent offense than it was last year. There was very few goal line touches to go around. So that's what I'm going to be paying close attention to throughout the rest of camp and early in the season. If Bijan Robinson is getting a lot of work, but he's not getting the goal line work, that is going to drastically cap his ceiling. So that's what I'm most interested in here.
Yeah, I think the thing to track here is do we have that steady drumbeat throughout all of camp that Tyler Algier remains up atop the depth chart with Bijan Robinson? Is he splitting all of those reps? And like you said, it's the high value touches that we really care about the most. But the fact that we're already having to have this conversation about a guy who's a potential top 5 pick is slightly worrisome. Let's go to our next team. The Baltimore Ravens. Tight end Mark Andrews is the top pass catcher, and the team is also looking to get backup tight end Isaiah Likely more heavily involved. Dave, I don't think this is very surprising for us. We've been talking about this, that the team wants to use 2 tight ends, that Isaiah Likely, the genie's out of the bag, the cat's out of the bottle, whatever other fun isms we want to use. But Isaiah Likely is going to be used in this offense. I don't necessarily believe he's going to be the second target on this team. I do still think that belongs to Zay Flowers. And I do think that the top 3 weapons are going to be Andrews, Flowers, and Derrick Henry on this team. But Isaiah Likely now has a pretty decent role. And maybe this throws a little bit of cold water on that Rashad Bateman report from a week ago.
Yeah, I think a lot of people view Isaiah Likely as a guy who has contingent upside that can kind of give you similar production to Mark Andrews if Mark Andrews is to miss time. But this is something Jeff Bell and I talked about months ago when we did our divisional breakdowns. If you look in college, Todd Monken at Georgia, his base personnel was two tight end sets. And now with the emergence of Isaiah Likely, outside of Zay Flowers, they don't have any other wide receivers there that are really a threat. So given how versatile Mark Andrews is and how versatile Isaiah Likely is, I don't think it should surprise anybody if Isaiah Likely is a full-time player in this offense. I did see that report about him being number 2 on the team in targets. I think a lot of times when beat reporters try to talk about projections and fantasy usage and the things that we care about, they don't have the clearest picture of that. There was that guy from Atlanta last year that said Bijan Robinson was going to have 100 catches. I think you need to take projections and usage with a grain of salt coming from a beat reporter. But I don't expect him to be second on the team in targets either. But it wouldn't surprise me one bit if he is third on the team in targets behind Andrews and Flowers.
Yeah, and then I think there's also like the added context of what does that mean when a player, because we talk about this all the time. XYZ player is the wide receiver one for that team. Does it matter? Is that team's going to be passing a lot? And so finding out if Likely is going to be the third target on a team where we don't really know the passing volume, I think it leaves a lot of unanswered questions there, if
Mhm.
anything. Next team on here, Buffalo Bills. Tight end Dalton Kincaid, who we have loved throughout this whole offseason, is a popular breakout candidate. I mean, especially with us, and I think with everybody, really.
Mhm.
But now there's the reports that Dawson Knox, excuse me, might limit the playing time and overall upside of Dalton Kincaid because he's out there on the field a lot. But Dave, like I want us to get ahead of this because you and I have talked about this. Is that it does not matter that Dawson Knox is out there on the field because Dalton Kincaid has been wildly successful with Knox on the field, and you have mentioned this multiple times. They play different roles,
Mhm.
and I think with the reshaping of this offense, this headline for the Buffalo Bills does not bother me one bit about Dalton Kincaid.
No, not at all. I mean, Dalton Kincaid is essentially their big slot. He had the third highest slot rate in the NFL last year. And Dawson Knox is more of a traditional inline tight end. So both of these guys can be on the field together. I think what worries me a little bit about Dawson Knox is that he is a trusted target near the end zone. And we've seen that from Josh Allen. We've also got Keon Coleman, who his best skill set is probably going to be near the end zone on some of these jump balls. So that's what concerns me a tad is that the touchdown upside for Dalton Kincaid might be capped a little bit if Dawson Knox and Keon Coleman become the preferred targets there. But I'm not kidding when I say that Dalton Kincaid has a path to 150, 160 targets in this offense. So if we're talking about, Dawson Knox potentially capping his touchdown upside, I'm still not all that concerned because Dalton Kincaid could easily have more targets this year than any other tight end.
Yeah, we've been talking about it. That those first what six maybe tight ends, maybe seven. It's pretty flat there in terms of the rankings and how we're willing to draft those guys. Dalton Kincaid, no worries about him there. Before we move on, I want to remind everybody we've got a ton of ways for you to enjoy this show. First being right here on youtube.com/ at football guys fantasy. And if you're watching this video, please make sure you like it, subscribe to the channel. You're going to get, we're giving you 4 episodes a week on YouTube during the fantasy football season. And you're going to be getting that the day before the audio comes out. So you're always going to be at a little bit of an advantage over any of your league mates if they also listen to this show. So make sure you subscribe to the YouTube channel. But the audio side, the podcast has an extra 10 to 15 minutes, a little extra deep dive that we do right at the beginning. So you get that bonus content. And Dave, we've got our Listener League giveaway exclusive to our Apple Podcast subscribers. We've already had some people pulling some fun voodoo over here where they're like they don't have an Apple phone, but they're stealing someone else's, leaving the review and sending in the screenshot. That's all you guys have to do. Leave a review on Apple Podcast and send in the screenshot to abrown@footballguys.com, and we'll be announcing the winner really soon. All right, let's move on. Carolina Panthers. One of our favorite running backs throughout this whole offseason has been Jonathon Brooks. We love the league winning upside. We talked about him, giving him that superlative in our last episode that he's going to be on the most fantasy championship rosters. Now we get the report. Jonathon Brooks likely to miss the first 3 to 4 weeks of the regular season, meaning Chuba Hubbard will likely lead the backfield at that time while Brooks is out. Dave, does this change anything for you with Jonathon Brooks, or does it just really confirm, okay, we understand the role that he's going to be out for a little bit, and then when he's back, he's the guy, he's the primary guy?
Yeah, that was pretty expected. And,
Right.
I expected when I saw the news that Jonathan Brooks was going to hit pup, I was like, cool. Like, I've been drafting on underdog all off season. And, I was by the dip, diamond hands, like whatever you want to call it. Like I was, channeling my inner crypto bro here with
Oh,
Jonathan
don't do
Brooks.
it.
But His ADP hasn't really budged. I was hoping that there'd be an opportunity to draft him for cheaper, but I think that this was kind of baked into his ADP already. So this is expected. He's coming off an ACL tear, and I made quite a kerfuffle on Twitter the other day when I made a comparison to Todd Gurley tearing his ACL and kind of showed this is the first 5 weeks of of Todd Gurley's rookie season after tearing his ACL. Inactive week 1, inactive week 2, 7 touches in week 3, 21 touches in week 4, and 30 touches in week 5. Now, he's on almost the same exact timeline as Jonathan Brooks coming back from his ACL recovery. So I don't know if we're going to see him getting 30 touches by week 5, but being inactive for the first 2 or 3 weeks, getting eased in over a 2 or 3 week period, and then taking over as the workhorse by week 6 to week 8, I think that's probably how we see this play out.
Yeah, if anything, I honestly do believe that this ADP might continue to go down, especially for
I
people in
hope.
their home leagues. They see, your home league team league mates are going to see the report. He's out for the first 3 to 4 weeks, and I think people are going to panic a little bit and not want to draft him because they're thinking, oh, that means he's not ready. The injury's going to linger around. I don't want to deal with that. Especially if you have an IR spot, man. I'm happy drafting this guy well ahead of ADP, making sure that I have him on my team. Dave, next team here, Chicago Bears, rookie wide receiver, Rome Odunze,
Mhm.
looking like he could actually be, and I know it's gonna sound crazy when I say it, looking like he could actually be wide receiver 1 or 2 on the Bears roster here early in camp. This is something that you've been talking about. That every report you've read and everything. I mean, you're a Bears fan yourself. That Rome Odunze, that connection with Caleb Williams looks really special right now.
So first of all, what I want to say is where we're getting these talking points from today. Over at Football Guys, we do in-depth training camp reports where we have a different person covering every single team. We write up about 1,000 words per week on each team, and then sum that up with some bullet points. So all these bullet points that we're doing today, it's been great for you and I, Alfredo. We haven't had to do any pre-show prep. We just stole the bullet points that our staffers put together and kind of use that as our talking points for this show. But I'm covering the Chicago Bears. And yesterday morning, I spent a few hours just poring over all of the training camp reports and watching every interview I could and reading what beat writers had to say on Twitter. And I was shocked by the amount of love that Roma Dunze is getting. He had a quote where he said something along the lines of, I'm not ready to concede that I'm the wide receiver 3 on this team. And ADP has said that it is very clearly DJ Moore, Keenan Allen, Roma Dunze. But the more I am digging into these Bears camp reports, the more allured I am by Rome Odunze. It seems like every single day, the highlight play of the day is Caleb Williams and Rome Odunze connecting on a big play when they had to do red zone drills near the end zone. Rome Odunze by far led everybody else in touchdowns. It seems like he and Caleb Williams are really playing the same game right now and have developed a strong chemistry. So I still think DJ Moore is going to be the wide receiver 1 there. And it's tough to say that Roma Dunze is objectively going to be better than Keenan Allen, but it's really tough to ignore these reports out of Chicago. This Roma Dunze drumbeat is getting louder and louder by the day.
Yeah, I think it's something that we discount a little far too often, that rookie quarterbacks with rookie wide receivers, they get a
Mhm.
lot more time to work together, especially at those mini camps and the off season, and just even just going to events. It doesn't even have to be football related stuff. There is that intangible factor, like that is Caleb's guy, and he knows he's going to be
Mhm.
tied to him for at least the next 4 years. Same thing with DJ Moore, right, with that contract extension. But I think that we are maybe devaluing Roma Dunze a little bit because of the uncertainty. And we've talked about that, is that you've got these ambiguous situations. You can actually find the most value there. Roma Dunze is just incredibly talented as well. So it's pretty easy to bet on him. Next team here is the Cincinnati Bengals. Running back Chase Brown looks to be
Ooh.
on track to be the starting running back and has significant fantasy upside in this role. So much so that even offensive tackle Orlando Brown has said he would draft him as his first running back in fantasy because
Well,
Chase
that's
Brown looks
crazy.
special. Yeah, don't take that advice. That's bad advice. Don't do that. Don't do that. That's crazy. But I mean, this is speaking volumes. The fact that not only is he looking like the starter, but that he was the guy I think that we both agreed had better upside over Zach Moss. Yeah, when I talk about Zach Moss, like I talk him as like a middle management guy being given a CEO role, and we don't normally like running backs like that. But if Chase Brown is going to get the bulk of the carries here, I'm very happy drafting him in fantasy drafts.
I have moved Chase Brown ahead of Zach Moss in my
Nicely done.
rankings. And, like I so often do on the weekends, I was just ripping underdog drafts like crazy all weekend. Did 5 yesterday. And in those 5 BBMs that I did, Chase Brown went before Zach Moss in every single one of them. I actually saw Zach Moss fall 4 rounds below ADP. So this
Hmm.
is something that I think a lot of people were hoping for after last season ended. Chase Brown really showed some exciting stuff down the stretch there, but then Zach Moss got signed, and that was kind of a wet blanket on the Chase Brown hype. But it's impossible to ignore what we're hearing. And I've seen some of the biggest Zach Moss truthers out there. My friend Adam Koffler, who's been pounding the table for Zach Moss all offseason, said, I'm switching my take on here too, and I'm moving Chase Brown ahead of Zach Moss. It's impossible to ignore. And we talked about it a few times, just the workload that Chase Brown had in college. He saw 328 carries his final year at Illinois. So, like, this guy can shoulder a big workload. I think he's a lot more than just kind of a give him 4 to 5 touches a game and see if he can be a spark plug type of player. He can run between the tackles. He can do a little bit of everything. So I am definitely taking heed here. I think Chase Brown is one of those guys that, like, the more we hear out of Cincinnati, I'm just going to keep moving him up, keep moving him up, keep moving him up. Wouldn't surprise me if he ends up inside the top 24 of consensus rankings by the time draft season rolls around.
Next team on here, Cleveland Browns. Tight end David Njoku is working on his technique with Coach Mike Vrabel and should be a big part of the passing game this season. So I don't know how to take it when I hear that a tight end is working with a former linebacker. I know that Mike Vrabel has done some so he did like some of the tight end work when he was switching sides for the Patriots there, and I'm sure he has played the position and knows it very well. So I mean, this is one of those things that I'm not trying to get too over the moon about. Like I already was not very high on David Njoku. I think I still keep him around tight end 10 for me because it seems like really the only thing that has worked with David Njoku in that Browns offense is Joe Flacco. So I'm very pessimistic about David Njoku. I understand he's an incredible athlete. This is not about the player himself. There's something where the connection simply is not there with Deshaun Watson. And now with the addition of Jerry Judy, I still remain very hesitant to draft David Njoku, despite the positive reports in this camp.
Yeah, and this is one of the few that you and I just aren't going to align on, and that's just the way that it is sometimes. I'm in on David Njoku, very much so. Talented player. Seems like he finally figured it out, and the coaching staff found out how to unlock him last year.
With Joe
Of
Flacco
course, what was it? Yeah, with Joe Flacco, and that's the big question.
and
Like, can he
and an
continue to
old
do it?
offensive coordinator.
I don't know. Yeah. But what I want to say, Alfredo, is you're discounting Mike Vrabel as
Sorry.
a pass catcher. He had 14 career targets, and he turned those 14 targets into 10 touchdowns. So possibly
Efficiency.
one of the most efficient pass catchers we've seen in NFL history there. So put some respect on Mike Vrabel, please.
I have been served. All right. Next team on here, Dallas Cowboys. Oh boy. Running back Ezekiel Elliott is considered the starter, but has not looked sharp in early camp practices. Running backs Rico Dowdle and Royce Freeman are vying for the number 2 role in what will be a heavily utilized committee. Yuck.
Yeah,
Dave, what are we doing here? What are we doing here? I don't want Zeke. I don't want Zeke. And honestly, I don't know that
I
I
don't want
see the
Rico
upside.
Dowdle either.
Yeah, like I see the upside with these guys, and I guess like maybe Royce Freeman is a fine last round pick. You and I talked about this, but I really do think that the lead running back for this team is not on the roster yet.
I mean, we said that all last offseason too, right? When we're like,
I guess.
they're not going into the season
Well,
with
it was different.
Tony
Tony
Pollard
Pollard.
and Rico Dowdle, are they? And they did.
But it was different. Like at least Tony Pollard was younger, and there was the
Yeah.
expectation that he was going to go in and play well. This is like there's not really a way to say it. That's going to be nice. A crusty old rundown Ezekiel Elliott who looked horribly inefficient last year,
Yeah.
and two very unproven other commodities at the running back spot. I I just think that we see running backs get cut or traded or whatever all the time in preseason. And I do believe we're going to end up with a Khalil Herbert
Khalil
or a
Herbert,
Samaje
Dameon
Perine,
Pierce.
Damian Pierce. Yeah, like there's so many options for this team.
It's possible. I don't know, man. I'm still drafting Zeke, and like I don't feel good about it, but
You
I,
shouldn't.
I think the volume could be there, and that's really just what it comes down to. Is like even if he is inefficient and worn down, I think that he's still going to be the lead back here, and I think that he's going to be the goal line back, which is most important. It's a lot like Derrick Henry, another guy whose efficiency is
Don't you
trending
dare.
downward, but
Don't you
we are
dare.
But I'm just saying, we're drafting Derrick Henry, who is older with more miles on his legs, also trending down in efficiency. But we're saying, yeah, but the out is that he could score 20 or 25 touchdowns. The out for Zeke is that he can score 20 or 25 touchdowns, but he's getting drafted in round 9 and 10 as opposed to round 3. So I'm okay taking the discount on Zeke, even if you don't feel very good about it.
Dave thinks that Derrick Henry and Ezekiel Elliott are the same player because they are older and trending down. Put that in the comments, everyone.
Eh,
Just go after him. Do it. Help the algo. All right, next on here, Denver Broncos wide receiver Cortland Sutton is finally the Broncos' unquestioned number one wide receiver. Boy, that sounds really nice as a headline. Young
mhm.
wide receivers Marvin Mims and Troy Franklin are getting some snaps at camp, though neither yet seem to be an every down contributor. Dave, the real question here is, do
Mhm.
we care that Cortland Sutton is the wide receiver one for the Broncos? Because he's typically being drafted and ranked somewhere around like wide receiver 36 or wide receiver 40 in fantasy. Like, how good could the wide receiver one actually be on this Broncos offense?
Probably not very good, but he's so cheap that I'm willing to do it. I've always had a soft spot for Cortland Sutton. I think he's a very good receiver. Obviously, there are some concerns here about Bo Nix and his ability to push the ball downfield. I think the passing game is really going to be funneled through the running backs here. But Cortland Sutton, as cheap as he is, I'm willing to take the chance because he could end up with, 100 plus targets. And that's going to make him somewhat valuable, even if it is kind of as a volatile wide receiver 3 or wide receiver 4. And then there's always just the chance that maybe we're just totally wrong on Bo Nix and he's a better quarterback than we expect. And Cortland Sutton is the wide receiver 1 on a better than expected offense. So I'm okay doing it just because, projected number 1 target, pretty talented player in my opinion in Cortland Sutton, and just the fact that maybe we could be wrong on the Broncos as a whole. So there's nobody else that I'm interested in though, like Marvin Mims, Troy Franklin. I'm not falling for those traps, but I will take the chance on Cortland Sutton this year.
So my issue with Cortland Sutton is that I think there's legitimately no upside here. You're going to draft him as the wide receiver 40, and I think the best he can finish is the wide receiver 40. Last year,
Yeah.
looking at it right now, 90 targets, 10 touchdowns, David.
Yeah.
Finishes the wide receiver 35.
Hmm.
I'm like, I don't even see the path for that to happen. Like a
Yeah.
wide receiver 40 feels like best case scenario.
Yeah.
And that's
Eh,
like that's upsetting.
Yeah. And I mean, I could see him potentially, he did miss a game last year. I mean, the best case scenario for Cortland Sutton is like 900 yards and 10 touchdowns. And that, is, like I said, volatile wide receiver 3 production. But considering you could draft this guy as like your wide receiver 5, I think that it's worth it just to keep him stashed in case the Broncos are a little bit better than we expect them to be.
Hmm, hmm, okay. Next on here, Detroit Lions quarterback Jared Goff has been in top form and showing more arm strength. That'll help for those deep balls to Jameson Williams, huh? Huh?
Yeah.
But I think the real thing here, it's kind of good that there's nothing too crazy coming out of Lions camp. We've already talked about Jameson Williams, but I think for me, Dave, the thing this shows is that this Lions offense and this Lions team in general, it wasn't just a Cinderella story or a fluke. This is a team that's actually very good at football. And Jared Goff can continue to man this offense and give us very fantasy relevant players that can be great this season.
Yeah. I'm not going to get on my soapbox about this too much, but you just gave Jared Goff $212 million. All right. Like, this is a guy who, on his rookie contract, took a team to the Super Bowl. Since he has been in Detroit, they've been one of the best offenses in the league. And I feel like people have this just like weird idea of Jared Goff that he's like not a good football player. Like, maybe he didn't live up to the expectations as the consensus number 1 overall pick, but he's a darn good football player. And I don't think many people would push back like on him being a top 10 or a top 12 NFL quarterback. And it seems like still, despite like 3 years of being in Detroit and being very successful here in Detroit and supporting a very potent offense, there's still questions about Jared Goff. I think we need to throw those out the window. Like, good offensive line, good run game, good quarterback, good wide receivers, good tight ends. It's just weird, the perception that people have of Jared Goff, who has been a very very good quarterback for the last half decade.
Yeah, Lions. It's great offense. It's a great offense. Good pieces around him. Just
What
continue
I'm
to
saying is
trust them.
this shouldn't be shocking. Is really
Yeah,
what it comes down to. Like, Jared Goff looking good in camp shouldn't be the main storyline out of Detroit, but it is. And like we should know that because Jared Goff's been pretty good for the last few years.
Yeah, let's not even waste any more time on it. Next team on here, Green Bay Packers. Wide receiver Romeo Dobbs getting a lot of love, looking more and more like a not just a wide receiver one, but potentially the team's wide receiver one. And I'll be honest here. I've also seen the reports that Christian Watson looks like the team's wide receiver one. The big overarching theme here is that both Watson and Dobbs look to have separated themselves pretty handedly from Jaden Reed and from even the other batch. And then there's a very, very big gap from the other guys like Dontavian Wicks and Bo Melton, who, Dave, I know you're a big Bo Melton guy. And there's been a lot of people that have been very excited about Dontavian Wicks. But Romeo Dobbs looks like he could be the best value on this team because he's being drafted as the third wide receiver on this team when, in fact, he could actually be the top wide receiver on this team.
Yeah, and I certainly don't want to pick a victory lap after the first week of
But you're
the
going to?
preseason.
But
Yeah,
you're
I'm
going
going to rev it up. Here I go. No, but
God, that was
I
so
mean,
not cool. That was that
J-
was that was easily one of the least cool things you've ever done on this
I
show.
don't know. I've done a
Brum,
lot of
brum.
pretty uncool things on this show, but I've been saying this all off season. And I was on Late Round Perspective a couple weeks ago with JJ Zacharyson. And we talked in depth about this Packers room, and I said, typically I know we want to trust the markets because aggregated data from tens of thousands of drafters is going to create a pretty sharp market. But this is one that I've just been adamant all offseason that the market has it wrong. And anytime I say anything slanderous about Jaden Reed on Twitter, I get absolutely shredded for it because everybody loves Jaden Reed, but so much of his production last year came from this extraordinary touchdown rate that he's not going to be able to replicate. And at the end of the day, he was a 55% snap player. And then what we saw on Family Night when they went out and ran this exhibition game is that Romeo Doubs and Christian Watson were the wide receiver one and the wide receiver two. Jaden Reed came in to play in the slot like he did last year. And that's concerning to me. Like, we shouldn't be drafting a guy who is purely a slot player as the team's wide receiver one. So Dubs doesn't have all of the flashy and alluring metrics that we like in fantasy football, but he's a good player and the coaches like him and the quarterback likes him. Jair Alexander came out and said that he's one of the best wide receivers in the league. Like, he's just a guy who does those gritty things that matter on a football field. He's a good blocker. He's sure-handed. He's good at sniffing out the end zone. He's good at picking up the first down, and that's going to keep him a central part of this offense. So I don't know if he's got upside to be a top 15 or even a top 20 wide receiver in fantasy, but he's going to be a full-time player on this offense. And I think what he does is really limit what we're hoping from Jaden Reed and his potential breakout. So I'm pretty steadfast in my belief here that Romeo Dubs and Christian Watson are the guys that are good values to draft. Jaden Reed is an easy fade. Dontavian Wicks has moved up so much in value that I'm not that interested in him. And I'll continue throwing my final round darts at Bo Melton.
Next team on here, Houston Texans. The expectation for reigning offensive rookie of the year, quarterback CJ Stroud, are sky high.
Oh, you
Yeah,
don't say, Alfredo.
I didn't need a report to tell me that. It seems like everyone's expecting an MVP type season, just a continued ascension for CJ Stroud. The addition of Stephon Diggs obviously helps that. The addition of Joe Mixon also helps that.
Who
Dave,
is notably dealing with a hamstring injury right now. So
yes,
yeah,
yes.
that's definitely concerning. But yeah, I think this is kind of like a no news is good news type of thing out of Houston. Like, if there aren't any major storylines, that probably is a good thing. I mean, CJ Stroud, rookie of the year last year. He's going to be an MVP candidate this year. I think this is what we expected from Houston.
So what I will say, Dave, is this: I just came back from the Fantasy League of Experts, the Flex League that Jake Seeley runs, and we did our live draft up in New York. And CJ Stroud went off the board as the quarterback 7 in what looks like, yeah, the 8th round.
Hmm.
I think that's a bit late because I think that quarterbacks went a bit late here. The first quarterback didn't go until round 4. So I think that most home leagues might start to take these guys a bit earlier, but I think we're going to see probably CJ Stroud getting drafted somewhere around quarterback 5 to 7 in most home league drafts. And I think we're going to see him get drafted as early as potentially even the 4th round or 5th round in home league drafts. Is that where you'd be comfortable taking him, or you really like where he was taken in the flex league draft in round 8 as quarterback 7?
Yeah, I think that's a good value. Round 8, quarterback 7, I'd be in on him. And we see him going a little bit higher in underdog drafts, but I think so much of that is because stacking is at like the forefront of everybody's
Yeah.
thoughts when they're drafting on underdog. And you've got Nico Collins, Stephon Diggs, Tank Dell all going in the top 4 rounds. So then you have 3 drafters that are all trying to outbid each other on CJ Stroud. And I think that that just naturally continues to move his ADP up a little bit. So I don't think that Stroud's underdog ADP is an accurate just depiction of where he's actually going to go in drafts. I think that he's going to be more in that like QB7 range, like, alongside Joe Burrow, behind Kyler Murray. And I'd be okay drafting him there. But if he maintains that QB6 price tag that he has in underdog right now, I'm going to want no CJ Stroud in redraft this year.
Indianapolis Colts wide receiver Michael Pittman Jr. is the very obvious top receiver for the team, but it's being reported that the gap between him and Josh Downs may be smaller than expected. The other thing to note here is that rookie wide receiver AD Mitchell is currently trailing Alec Pierce on the depth chart. So we're looking at a team that has Michael Pittman, Josh Downs, Alec Pierce, and then Adonai Mitchell. I think the big thing to take out here is one, it seems pretty locked and loaded that Pittman and Downs are going to be the guys out on the field in two wide receiver sets, but also maybe Josh Downs has more value than we think. This is a guy who's phenomenal in college, coming out of North Carolina, who was one of my top 5 wide receivers in that rookie class ahead of Quentin Johnston. And really glad I got that one right because it was a little nerve wracking there. But Josh Downs he can do so many things. He's such an impressive route runner. He's actually great on the deep ball, surprisingly good on the deep ball. Remember, this is a guy who played with Drake
Mhm.
May for a bit there. And I think that the good thing here is that Michael Pittman and Josh Downs can just do different things for this offense. And I think with Anthony Richardson coming back and really trying to get himself comfortable in what's still essentially kind of a new offense for him, and he really hasn't had that experience in the field, he's going to be looking for the easy targets. And I think Downs gives him that easy target game after game.
You might know the answer to this, Alfredo, but humor me, play along for the audience. I'm
Yeah.
going to give you 2 players blindly, player A and player B. I'm going to tell you what they did last year as rookies. Tell me who you prefer. Player A had 94 targets, 64 receptions, 793 yards. Player B had 98 targets, 68 receptions, and 771 yards. Who would you prefer in that situation?
Dave, I'm not going to lie. They sound like the exact same player. I'm horrible at visualizing this stuff.
They are almost the same exact player. One of them is Jaden Reed. That was player A. Player B is Josh Downs, who had the edge in targets and receptions as a rookie. So
Nicely
again,
done.
I'm poo-pooing on Jaden Reed all over again, but Josh Downs had an amazing rookie season. He didn't score a lot of touchdowns, so people don't really notice it, but he was so productive as a rookie. Now we're hearing, these reports that he's taken a step forward in year 2, that Anthony Richardson loves throwing the ball to him. Josh Downs, easily one of the best or one of the best values in drafts right now.
Yeah, absolutely love Downs there. And I think the last thing there is that we can all cool down on rookie wide receiver AD
Mhm.
Mitchell. Like we all get very excited about rookies, but remember this is a
There's a reason
dynasty.
he
We're talking
slid.
redraft here. Yeah,
There's a
yeah.
reason he slid in the draft. Yeah.
All right, next on here we've got Jacksonville Jaguars wide receiver Brian Thomas. And once again, we're talking about a rookie wide receiver. The plan for him here in the first week of camp has been a little mixed with some good, some bad. He's worked with the first team, he's worked with the second team. Uh, this is something I've been saying all throughout the offseason, Dave, is that Brian Thomas is going to need a little bit of time to develop here and to get a few more routes into his route tree and develop that timing with Trevor Lawrence. We saw how difficult it was for Trevor Lawrence to even just get timing with Calvin Ridley last year on a lot of those downfield throws. Not to mention you've got Gabe Davis being another downfield guy here. Brian Thomas, I think despite the talent and the high draft capital, we're all getting a little over our skis here to steal your term. And people are getting a little excited and drafting him too early. I'm actually going to say this. It might be a little bit bold, but I think that Brian Thomas is going to be one of those players that is going to get dropped on a lot of teams by week 4 or 5 of the
Mhm.
fantasy season and then added back again around week 12 or 11 because all of a sudden he's shining come fantasy football playoff time.
Sounds a lot like Justin Jefferson's rookie season where he got off to a slow start and everyone said, well, this guy sucks. And then he went for 1,400 yards. I don't think Brian Thomas is going for 1,400 yards, but Yeah, exercise patience with rookies. And I think this is just a good reminder that all of these guys, regardless of their draft capital and their college production, it is a big change going from college football to the NFL football. So, yeah, I'm still drafting Brian Thomas, just knowing that I'll need to exercise some patience. And I shouldn't expect him to be the wide receiver one on a team where Christian Kirk and Evan Ingram already have a strong chemistry with the quarterback. So, Brian Thomas, hoping for some late season production here, but probably not expecting a lot in the first quarter of the season.
Kansas City Chiefs Patrick Mahomes wants to make it clear that new wide receivers Hollywood Brown and Xavier Worthy are far more than just deep threats. These aren't just fast players, but they can do a whole bunch of stuff, Dave. And you and I have talked about this throughout the offseason that we are going to see a wide receiver room that has a little bit more nuance. The playbook can open up a bit more. This isn't Marquez Valdez Scantling running deep and
Mm,
dropping it. This isn't McCole Hardman on a trick play. This isn't Kadarius Toney lining up at running back and then fumbling or dropping. This is going to be a much improved offense. And I think where my worries for Rashee Rice stem from these two players and how good they actually just can be, and not just in soaking up target. I said soaping up targets. That's cut that from the pod, please.
Julia.
Uh, yep, Julia, cut it. But these guys can soak up targets and they can actually be incredibly efficient with the targets that they get and make some big plays. So I am excited here with both of these guys, Dave. I know you are as well.
Yeah, and this is something that I talked about earlier this offseason when I wrote my article on Hollywood Brown. I went out with the intention of writing an article on Hollywood Brown, and it ended up kind of accidentally becoming a Hollywood Brown slash Xavier Worthy article because what we've seen since Tyreek Hill left the Chiefs is that every receiver was running exclusively deep downfield or exclusively underneath routes, and they haven't had anybody that could do both. And of course, if you remember Tyreek Hill during his time with the Kansas City Chiefs, he'd be catching balls 60 yards downfield and he'd also be catching screens and slants. He was kind of doing it all, and defenses never knew what to expect. So I think having two versatile receivers now, like Hollywood Brown and Xavier Worthy, is just going to completely unlock this Chiefs offense. In a way that we haven't seen. You know, the last 2 years has been very much so a dink and dunk, march down the field type of offense. And now with Worthy and Brown both having these versatile skill sets, it's just going to make for a much more fun Kansas City passing attack.
Maybe a less fun passing attack is the Las Vegas Raiders. But looks like they got some weapons coming in there that could make this a little more exciting because rookie running back Dylan Lobby. I've heard it both ways. Uh,
Lauby, I believe.
I believe it's Lobby. So you
Oh,
shut your mouth. Google it, search it, find the phonetic spelling. Thank you. Rookie running back Dylan L. positioning himself to make an immediate impact as the third down running back, which honestly, I think that takes a lot of the wind out of the sails for a guy like Zamir White, who we were expecting to be a three down back, getting some valuable touches. But if you're a two down running back on a not
mm.
so hot offense, that's kind of gross.
Yeah, and this was obviously the fear. You know, you looked at what Zamir White did in his starts last year. He did have a handful of games where he pulled a decent target volume, and you know the kind of thesis was like, well, you don't have to worry about Amir Abdullah taking targets away from him, and you don't have to worry about Alexander Madison. But Lauby was a pass catching specialist in college, and if that's all we're looking at from Zamir White is getting first and second down carries on the Raiders, who aren't going to have a lot of goal line work, that's definitely concerning, and that kind of flags Zamir White, unfortunately, as a potential dead zone running back.
Confirmed, by the way, Lobby.
All
During
right,
draft season, it was said lobby, and now I've seen here the confirmation for the pronunciation is like loud B, but removing the D.
all right.
Phrasing. Let's go to the next team here. Los Angeles Chargers. Justin Herbert gets diagnosed with plantar fasciitis. So he's got a plantar fascia injury. Team hopes that he's going to be back week one. That's not great to hear that
Mm,
your starting
mm.
quarterback has a foot injury. And this is a guy who we were hoping and expecting maybe a little bit more rushing value for fantasy because of Greg Roman being the offensive coordinator after all of his work with quarterbacks and how they've succeeded through the rushing game. But there just seems to be injuries everywhere. It's not just Justin Herbert. Ladd McConkey seems to have a lower body injury, missed some practice as well. These, when I start to look at the roster here, the whole roster of the Chargers are just filled with guys that missed time due to injuries. J.K. Dobbins, DJ Chark. Lad McConkey, Justin Herbert. It's a little worrisome. We were already worried, but now I think I'm more worried than ever.
Yeah, definitely. And you already mentioned it, but Greg Roman's offense, that was kind of the out with Justin Herbert is you're drafting him late, but maybe he's got some untapped rushing upside that we've never seen in his career. We know he's a good athlete, and maybe they lean on that a little bit, but plantar fasciitis is no joke. And Chargers fans will remember it well. Do you remember when Antonio Gates had plantar fasciitis and it lasted for like 3 full seasons where he'd
Dude, I remember
miss
when I
games?
had plantar fasciitis and it just ruined my life. So yeah,
Mhm.
this is serious.
Yeah, and it's one of those things that flares up and go away, and you think it's behind you, and then it comes back again. So I don't want to like just be sounding the alarms here, but plantar fasciitis is definitely a concerning injury, and they said that he had a tear in his fascia as well, which makes it a pretty serious injury. Said their expectations are that he's going to be there week 1, but they won't commit to it yet. Um, it
It's rough.
impossible not to move Herbert down in your rankings a little bit after this.
Yeah, it's not just him moving down the rankings, it's everyone on this Chargers team
Yep.
goes way down the rankings. And Chargers, Broncos, there's going to be some bad football being played this year in the NFL. Next team on here, Los Angeles Rams. We're seeing that Demarcus Robinson looks to have a stranglehold on the wide receiver 3 position on this team, which could actually end up being something of really big value now that Puka Nakua has come down with an injury. Um, Dave, this is there could be some opportunity here for these wide receivers. I know Cooper Cup. It's said that he is back, like he is back in full strength, but he's dealt with injuries. Puka Nakua now has an injury. Demarcus Robinson being that wide receiver 3, we saw how valuable a role like that could be last year. Tutu Atwell, and it's kind of a revolving door at wide receiver. So does Demarcus Robinson become one of your favorite late round picks to make in fantasy drafts?
Yeah, I mean, we saw it that during the fantasy playoffs last year, he was a top 12 wide receiver along with Cooper Cup and Puka Nakua. And now with reports about Puka being injured, saying week to week, like that's concerning. A week to week knee injury when we're a month out from the season can't help but get somewhat concerned about that. But we saw last year that the wide receiver 3 in general was pretty valuable here in Los Angeles, and we saw it 2 years ago when Odell Beckham went on his little tear at the end of the season. We saw early in the year Tutu Atwell was pulling 8 to 10 targets per game, almost every single game, and then Demarcus Robinson came in and he was a top 12 receiver for about a month. So there is definitely value to be had here. This is an offense that's going to throw a ton. Matthew Stafford's playing some of the best football of his life. So definitely, some excitement about Demarcus Robinson as a wide receiver 3. But if Puka Nakua has to miss any time, and Demarcus Robinson's the wide receiver 2 behind Cooper Cup, we could be looking at some really good production there. So definitely makes him a very intriguing late round target.
Next team on here, Miami Dolphins. Coach Mike McDaniel says that he views Raheem Mostert as the starting running back for this team, and that Devon Achan could also still see his workload increase. So to me, this feels a lot like it does in the NBA, where you have a starting 5, but then one of those starters will come out of the game within 3 minutes, and then
Mhm.
your sixth man, who ends up being one of your best players in the team, like the Heat do this
Manu
all the time.
Ginobili.
Yeah, like the Miami Heat have done this with Tyler
Yeah.
Hero for
Mhm.
years in the past, and so like it's not all that uncommon to see this happen, especially with running backs. But how does this make you change your value with Mostert and HN?
We know that the Dolphins are going to be one of the most potent offenses in the league. Tua is probably going to throw for 4,500 plus yards. They're probably, as a team, going to rush for 2,000, 2,500 yards.
We'll be in the Super Bowl. Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, it's shocking if you look at what Tua has done as a passer. I think it's really kind of flown under the radar over the last couple of years. And I just recently wrote an article on Jalen Waddle, and I was surprised by how good this Dolphins offense has been over the last couple of years. I want to say I have a strong take, just because I love value and I love getting, cheap running backs. Jalen Wright is the guy that I find drafting the most, but I'm trying to leave basically every draft with one of Devon Achan, Raheem Mostert, or Jalen Wright. There's going to be a lot of rushing yards. There's going to be a lot of rushing touchdowns, and we like to trick ourselves into thinking we know exactly how they're going to shake out. But I don't know. I'm copping out. I like all these running backs in Miami. I'll draft them all at cost.
Yep, I think that's a fine cop out there, especially for actionable fantasy advice. Next on here, Minnesota Vikings quarterback Sam Darnold taking the majority of first team reps, which we expected. But I think really the thing that I want to talk about here is that he's a legit fantasy option for people who are in two quarterback leagues, or they take a risk with, let's say, like a rookie, like a Caleb Williams or a Jaden Daniels, and they want one of those late round guys or someone they pick up. Dave, I'm saying this right now. I would not be surprised if by week 2 or 3, Sam Darnold is one of those guys we are talking about in a waiver wire episode. That man, look at him, back to back weeks of 20-point games, something like that. We saw it last year. Nick Mullins, final 4 starts this season. He was a top 12 quarterback in 3 of those games. So it wasn't just the Josh Dobbs passionate rushing upside. This offense can just make players produce. So I would not be surprised if Sam Darnold is looking really good.
And I'm seeing the JJ McCarthy hive out here is like pumping up all of these videos of JJ McCarthy throwing touchdowns to receivers that I've never heard of against defenders that I've never heard of. But at the end of the day, Sam Darnold's the one that's getting the reps with the first team, and I think that that's meaningful. Uh, I keep trying to think about like in what situation would the Vikings make a midseason shift from Darnold to JJ McCarthy? And it's either that Darnold is so bad that they just need to, is kind of the only way that I think they make that shift. But even then, like they might not want to throw JJ McCarthy into the fire too early and, possibly impede his development. So I think we see a lot of Sam Darnold this year.
Next on here, New England Patriots tight end Hunter Henry is enjoying yet another eye-opening camp. Perhaps the new regime will carry that over into real play. These are not my words. This is someone else's words. But Hunter Henry, this is a guy that I think has been a certainly a very fine tight end target late in drafts, especially if you miss out on one of those top 12 uh, tight ends and you're saying, okay, well, I can maybe get TJ Hawkinson, put him on an IR spot, and then draft Hunter Henry. And I think that would end up being the situation or the strategy that you can use there. But I think the upside might be better than we even think. If Jacoby Brissett is as good as he's been in years past, or Drake May reaches his potential early in his rookie season, Hunter Henry is not just the top tight end, but he's the top target on this team. And there could be a lot of touchdown upside for him, even if the offense isn't so great.
Yeah. I mean, volume cures all woes, and
Mhm.
Hunter Henry might not be the best tight end, and the Patriots might not be the best offense, but if he's seeing 80, 90 targets, there's definitely value to be had here. So this is just, the receivers, they've got a lot of like, I don't know how to say this. They've got a lot of fun receivers: Demario Douglas, Javon Baker, Jalen Polk. They're names that we have excitement for, but there's not really a wide receiver one in that list, and it's
There's guys with a lot
possible.
of potential, not
Exactly.
what we've seen that's established. The way
And
Hunter
and
Henry is.
Hunter Henry is by all definitions an established tight end. Like he's been doing it for a long time. He's going to be on the field. He's going to pull targets. So, we fall trap into falling in love with these late round tight ends all the time. But Hunter Henry is definitely one of my favorite late round tight end targets.
We're gonna go a little faster through these final teams here. New Orleans Saints star running back Alvin Kamara doesn't feel like he has quote old bones. He's not worried about the age cliff. But you know what, Alvin? Neither are we. Neither are we, bud.
Yeah, I think so much of his production comes through the passing game. He doesn't have the same mileage on his legs that a lot of other 29-year-old backs do. Like you compare a 29-year-old Alvin Kamara to a 29-year-old Ezekiel Elliott or a 29-year-old Derrick Henry or a 29-year-old Leonard Fournette, you're looking at, a very, very different type of usage profile. So Alvin Kamara didn't really look like he lost a step last year. He's still shifty in the open field. He can break tackles. He's got that acceleration that makes it really tough for somebody to catch up to him. I am still very in on Alvin Kamara this year, as I know you are as well, Alfredo.
Yep. New York Giants running back Devin Singletary, familiar with Brian Dable's offense from their time in Buffalo. He's the clear cut number one running back there. But it looks like the team is leaning more towards a committee approach than, more than they've ever had with Saquon Barkley on the roster, which I don't think this surprises either of us.
Yeah.
I think this is another one of those guys, like as much as we like Devin Singletary, I think this is another guy that falls into the mold of a good middle management running back that's being given CEO opportunity right here. And I don't think he's actually going to get CEO opportunity. I think we've convinced ourselves that he's going to get this crazy workload when really we're going to see a committee with guys like Tyrone Tracy and Eric Gray and the other running backs that are on this roster.
Yeah, I will continue to pump up Tyrone Tracy. One of my favorite draft picks that you can make at the very end of your draft, almost free. And if you're in a shallower league where you don't want to spend a draft pick on Tyrone Tracy, I would just watch his snap share every single week, because I think what we're going to see is that Devin Singletary, knowing Dable's offense, being the veteran, he's going to get that early season workload. But I think what we're going to see is Tyrone Tracy start to carve out a bigger and bigger role. He's only played running back for a full year at Purdue. It's still a position that he's getting more comfortable with, but I think that we're going to see his role grow as the season progresses. So we'll be talking about it on the waiver show, I'm sure, by week 3 or 4, that Tyrone Tracy is a guy that you're going to want on your roster.
New York Jets rookie running back Braylon Allen is in the lead for the number 2 job behind Brees Hall. And I think the thing to understand here is how important is that number 2 role on this offense and what does actually entail. I think the thing for me is we obviously know that Braylon Allen is a very big running back, well over 220 pounds. So he could, in fact, be on the field for some goal line stuff or short yardage stuff. But I think the thing that's surprised me more is that I'm hearing that he's out on the field for some passing down work, which is not
Oh,
really anything that
no.
yeah, sorry, pal.
Ugh.
But so the interesting thing to me here though, Dave, and like we could just flesh this out a little bit, is I don't know, and I don't know that I'm too worried. I didn't really like Braylon Allen's tape. I didn't really like his profile, despite having this young breakout age. He's a big running back that doesn't play like a big running back. He's not a great pass catcher. He doesn't really have a lot of experience with that. He hasn't really been too prolific in the passing game. So to hear that he's the number 2 running back, it's almost kind of like when we saw that Alexander Madison was going to the Raiders and we were like, oh, that's great. I'm actually not too worried about this for Brees Hall, but I do remember, obviously, we can always just go back to this. Just availability is the best ability. And when I say it this time, I'm not referring to injury. I just mean being on the field. So if Brees
Mhm.
Hall is coming off the field in any of these high value times for Braylon Allen, even if he's not good, that's still a little worrisome.
Well, I just want to say we've talked about Tyler Algier. We're talking about Braylon Allen. What I'm really hearing is that Christian McCaffrey is just on his way to another RB1 season uncontested. But yeah, I'm with you. Like, I don't get worried too much about Braylon Allen. I think that it's actually okay to take off some of those early down between the tackles runs, take those away from Brees Hall, keep him more fresh for the big plays and for the passing down work. Hopefully, we'll see some more goal line work this year after Brees Hall got almost none last year. But this is your typical. I think I said it last week. Thunder and lightning backfield where Braylon Allen projects to be the Thunder. We get the lightning from Brees Hall. I'm not too concerned about this. Let me ask you real quickly, Alfredo, who do you think has more touches at the end of the 2024 season, Braylon Allen or Tyler Algier?
Oh gosh. I think Tyler Algier ends up with more touches, but I also think that there could be a few other running backs getting involved there
In
in
New
New
York?
York, and I think there also could just be more
Izzy
pass
and
catching.
yeah.
Well, I mean, like they drafted Isaiah Davis as well, and like
Mhm.
I think there are some other pass catchers in New York who might get a little more involved than how condensed it could be in Atlanta.
Yeah. I'm not especially worried. Bijan and Brees, they can score from anywhere on the field anytime they get the ball. They catch a ton of passes. We know somebody else is going to be in the fold there, but they're both still smash first round picks.
Yeah. Next team on here, Philadelphia Eagles wide receiver Devonte Smith has been dominant in every practice. And, I try to avoid the reports like this where it just seems very hyperbolic of this player's in the best shape of his life or he's dominating.
Mhm.
But we haven't heard this in the past before about Devonte Smith. And actually, that has been given context in a lot of these reports that Devontae's always been good. He's always gotten open. But now it looks like something where he's just dominating every defender that's on him. He's getting open every single time. And he's getting just an insane amount of targets to the point that reporters are beginning to question who is the real wide receiver 1 on this team because the gap seems to be much tighter than in years before.
I don't know if I'm buying that, and I understand. Devonta Smith, he is good. I mean, we're talking about a former Heisman winner here. I love Devonta Smith, big fan, but I'm not willing to say that he's in even the same tier as AJ Brown. And
You mean you don't believe all the beat reporters all the time?
mm, yeah, yes and no. And I mean, they're very different too. It's like hard to compare these guys. It's like comparing Derrick Henry to Austin Eckler. I mean, these guys could not be more different in how they play football and what they do and the routes they run and what they do after the catch and all these sorts of things. So it's tough to compare the two. But yeah, I'm way in on Devonte Smith. He's a player I've liked for a long time. I'm in on AJ Brown as well. I think that they're both very good receivers. And as we've talked about a few times, Kellen Moore, when you look historically, he's always had like a wide receiver one. He's had CeeDee Lamb. He's had Keenan Allen. This is the first time he's had two very talented wide receivers. So it'll be fun to see how he kind of switches up his historical schemes and tendencies with a very, very, very good wide receiver, too.
Yeah, I just love this idea of Devonte Smith being able to line up all over the offensive formation. I just think it's going to be so much fun for him, and I think we are going to see a guy that has just some of the best value in fantasy drafts and maybe best production of his career. Next team on here, Pittsburgh Steelers. Quarterback Justin Fields has taken advantage of Russell Wilson's injury, putting himself very much in the mix for the starting job for the Pittsburgh Steelers in Week 1. Dave, are we falling into this again? I know you love yourself some Justin Fields. Would you be considering drafting him if we get the report tomorrow? Justin Fields has blown us away. He is our Week 1 starter. Are you drafting him in fantasy, and what does it do for the Steelers?
Yeah, definitely draft him. Like we know when this guy starts, he's giving you top five upside every single week because of how good he is as a rusher. Genuinely, one of the best rushers in the league. Like I think if he played running back, he'd go for 1,500 yards in this league. He is that good with the ball in his hands. But I'm not getting too excited about training camp stuff because Justin Fields always looks great in training camp. And we're seeing the big highlight plays. We're seeing the rushing touchdowns. We're seeing the big throws outside the numbers. But the other reports I'm reading from Pittsburgh are that he is still struggling to throw across the middle of the field. There was a play where George Pickens was wide open on an island waving his hands. Justin Fields didn't see him, tuck the ball and run. And that's the issue with Justin Fields. Like we know that he has the physical toolkit. We know that he is an elite athlete when he gets the ball in his hand. We know that he's got an arm like a howitzer that he can just launch a ball 75 yards down the field with a
A
perfect tight
what? What's her?
spiral. A howitzer. It's a
No, I
I
know.
believe it's
It's
in
just
yeah.
funny to hear you say it.
We know Justin Fields has these things. What he doesn't have is the ability to run an NFL offense and win games. And I understand why Steelers fans are getting so allured. I've been through this for 3 off seasons, and I'm hopeful for Justin Fields. Like I want him to put it together. Rumors are that Brandon Aiyuk could potentially get traded there, which would just make me even more excited about Justin Fields. But man, it's really tough for me. Like if he's named the Week 1 starter, I'll start drafting him because of the upside. But I still think that once Russ is healthy and this calf injury is behind him, he's going to take over as the QB1.
We got 5 more teams here, so we'll go through these relatively quickly, but this one's going to make it a little hard because the San Francisco 49ers, there's been a lot of drama with Brandon Ayuk, and is a deal going to get done? Is a trade going to happen? That we've heard up and down reports that 1 week Ricky Pearsall looks phenomenal. He's getting open all the time. And then the next day you see reports that he's struggling to get open against the competition in practice. And now, Dave, even as we're recording, there's a report out there that the
Mhm.
Steelers are looking to get a deal done as soon as possible for the San Francisco 49ers wide receiver Brandon Ayuk. So let's just unpack this. I'm going to give you the 2 scenarios here and how it affects the players. So let's say Brandon Ayuk stays in the Niners. What's his value there? And then let's say he goes to the Steelers. What happens? What's the trickle down with him and Pickens and Pearsall?
That's a lot to unpack. We could do a whole episode just on
Just
this.
really
Like,
quick.
yeah. So
One
I
liner
mean, the
for each one.
the prop the problem with Brandon Ayuk is that his career high is 114 targets in a season in San Francisco. Great football player, and I think that Kyle Shanahan is able to maximize his efficiency in this offense, but the volume is never going to be there. Like he's never going to be able to be a top 3 or top 5 wide receiver in San Francisco. If he goes to a team that passes the ball more and he doesn't have that target competition, his efficiency probably falls off a little bit, but I think he's got the skill set to see 160, 170 targets in a different offense and finishes a top 3, top 5 wide receiver. So I think the ceiling gets higher if he's in a new offense. And then if Brandon Ayuk leaves, one, the path for Ricky Pearsall to be a full time player is there. Two, George Kittle and Debo Samuel both see a huge boost in opportunities as well. So I think a Brandon Ayuk trade would be the best possible scenario for him, for Debo, for Kittle, and for Pearsall. Unfortunately, the guy here that would be the guy who doesn't benefit would be George Pickens.
Man, George Kittle, that value goes up so much for people that have been drafting him as like a tight end 7.
I think we said
Oh,
he'd be a top 3 tight end for both of us, right? If Ayuk's out of the picture, is that where we said
oh, if
top
he's
3,
out of
top
the
4?
yeah, if Ayuk's out of the picture, I mean, you got to look at Kittle as top 3 tight end. You
Yeah,
have to. You have to.
same tier at worst. Like, yeah, I mean, he's
I think
somewhere.
yeah,
Kelsey, Andrews, Laporta, Kittle is your top 4 in some order.
yes. In whatever order. Next team on here, Seattle Seahawks head coach Mike McDonald believes that running back Ken Walker needs to be fed. That's a direct quote. Needs to be fed and quote can be special. Dave, this is the time of year where normally we hear that running backs need to be getting rest and need to be sharing the workload. So, for a head coach who is a defensive minded coach and likely wants to control the clock and believes in his defense, for him to say this running back needs to be fed the ball, I think we need to listen. And I think that people that are ranking Ken Walker closer to like running backs 16 and 15 probably need to have him a little bit closer to like running back 12 or 10 or somewhere around that area because he could have himself a big year and be one of those players that we look back and say, why did we undervalue him?
Yeah, and I know again, this is another one of those running backs where or running back rooms where I think Ken Walker and Zach Charbonnet are both valued appropriately. Like, Ken Walker still has a lot of meat on the bone with his current ADP, where he could just maintain his stranglehold over the workload and smash his current ADP. And then Zach Charbonnet makes for pretty good value because of the contingent upside if Walker somehow gets hurt. But we know Ken Walker's good. I know this was like your boy coming out of college, and he has proving you right year after year, looking really good. Last year, he was eighth in the league in broken tackle rate. This guy just racks up big plays consistently. And he definitely is one of those guys that the more volume he gets, the better he gets because he's not the best at just like turning every play into something. He's kind of that 1 yards, -1 yards, 2 yards, -4 yards, and then a 78-yard touchdown. So I think that the best way for a guy like Ken Walker to get going is to consistently feed him volume. And I think that if that's what they want to do in Seattle, they're probably pretty right in wanting to do that.
Yeah, well, he's actually you mentioned like the volatility of the rushing there. It's like we saw that a lot in his rookie year, and he's gotten better at that, at taking what defenses are giving him. And I think that's something that he had to do in order to be, said for coaches to say like, hey, let's feed him a bit more. So yeah, man, I'm still in on Ken Walker, and especially right now he's going as a running back 17. I think that's fantastic value in drafts. Tampa Bay Buccaneers tight end Cade Otton continues to be a favorite target for Baker Mayfield. I like this. I think it's great. I don't know how often I'll be drafting Cade Otton, especially if he's going around like tight end 16, 17. Like I'm not usually getting a backup tight end, but I do think this is something for us to take note of, that he is getting himself a bigger role in this offense. And it makes me ask the question, like, how many players do we think Baker Mayfield is really going to support? Is he going to support Cade Otton, Rashad White, Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, and then now we've got rookie Jalen McMillan, who's also getting incredible raving reviews out of camp. There's got to be some odd men out here, Dave, and I wonder if it once again ends up being Otton, despite these reports that he's been a favorite target.
Yeah, I think, he's pretty good, and I think that he does his best work near the end zone, and scoring touchdowns like so many tight ends do, but I think in order for him to be a consistent fantasy contributor, we'd probably need to see an injury to either Mike Evans or Chris Godwin to open up that path, because right now he's gonna be 3rd or 4th on the team in targets, and, the likelihood of a guy in that situation being fantasy relevant is pretty slim.
Yeah, I think that's the worry with me here is like when you see a quarterback that gets so many of these targets, sort of like we did with Jordan Love, you just kind of say, oh, well, maybe the quarterback's just going to have a good season. Or you just go with the guys that are going to be getting that work, like, like a Mike Evans. Let's go to the next team here because, man, this has been just an up and down roller coaster over the last week. Tennessee Titans wide receiver DeAndre Hopkins looking like he will miss 4 to 6 weeks with a knee sprain. And then, man, the social team for the Titans was on their game because within, a day, they were like, let's get this video out here of Will Levis launching
Yeah.
lasers, just deep bombs to Nick Westbrook-Akine. Let's get everybody hyped again. And by George, did it work? Like the Twitter faithful were going nuts for Will Levis and his howitzer of an arm. And it's like, guys, we know that he can throw the ball deep. We know that he can do this. If we look at the context of that one play, he doesn't even look anywhere else. He doesn't even make a read. He
Right.
just catches and tosses deep, and it's just a good timing play to Nick Westbrook-Akine. I hope that you can do that if you're a starting quarterback in the NFL,
I
or
mean,
that
you
you can
know,
draft.
Levis is a big arm. Like
Yeah,
that's no surprise to anybody. Like, yeah, Levis has a cannon. We know that.
not surprising. What is the thing that I think we do need to talk about here is DeAndre Hopkins missing all this time. I get worried at his age. How does he recover from this knee injury? Can he actually give us any kind of upside? And what does this do to the rest of the team? Like, are we now actually targeting Calvin Ridley a bit more? Like, I don't know. I think I'm still just
Don't
in
make
only
me.
on. I think I'm not. I won't do it. But I think I'm more in on just these running backs for
Oh,
Tennessee, and I think it's going to stay that way no matter what reports we get out of the camp this offseason.
yeah, I'm not falling for Nick Westbrook-Akine. I'm not falling for Chigakonkwo. I like the running backs here. Calvin Ridley's just been a little bit too expensive for me to want to draft. And I will say, like DeAndre Hopkins, this is concerning, and his ADP is going to understandably fall. But DeAndre Hopkins does have some, rapport with Will Levis from last season. So it's not like missing out on training camp is going to put him like way behind other receivers. And the other thing I'll say about DeAndre Hopkins is that this dude is tough as nails. Like always has a Q next to his name. It seems like every single Sunday, but he just plays through injuries. Like he is a tough dude. So even if you're missing out on the first couple of weeks of the season, if this causes a big dip in DeAndre Hopkins ADP, and he's fallen to a point that I could draft him as like my wide receiver 5 or wide receiver 6, I'll probably take that chance because I think that there's a very good possibility that DeAndre Hopkins is the wide receiver 1 ahead of Calvin Ridley. And even if he misses the first couple of weeks, when he does return, he could pick up right where he left off last year.
Last team we're going to talk about here, Washington Commanders. We're getting news that wide receiver Terry McLaurin is starting to build that rapport with Jaden Daniels. And I think you and I are on the same sort of wavelength here, that we are not really that into the other targets there on that team. Jahan Dotson seems nice. I got to see it first. Luke McCaffrey, it seems nice. He's a rookie and potential fourth, fifth option on the team. The tight end situation is looking a little bit muddy. Uh, Terry McLaurin being the guy who is, particularly building rapport on downfield vertical routes with Jaden Daniels. What kind of value do you think you're getting there out of him? I saw him go as early as round 4 in that flex league draft that I did this last week. It was a bit high. He went ahead of T. Higgins and some other wide
Oh,
receivers that I would have taken well ahead of Terry McLaurin, but it seems like there's just a lot of excitement with people and this Washington Commanders offense.
yeah, I've typically seen him going in round 5 or 6, and I like him at that value. Definitely not taking McLaurin in round 4, but I mean, this is a guy over the last 4 years. His 17 game pace is 133 targets. Like he has been a target hog. The lowest target volume he's had over the last 4 years was in 2022, and he still saw 120 targets. So that's kind of like the floor that we're looking at. We know Cliff Kingsbury is going to want to throw the ball a lot. I have a little bit more faith in Jaden Daniels as a passer, as I think than I think a lot of other people do. So um, I'm okay drafting Terry McLaurin just because I don't, there's good pieces in Washington, Jahan Dotson and Luke McCaffrey and Zach Ertz and Ben Sinnott and Brian Robinson and Austin Eckler. But McLaurin's very clearly the wide receiver 1 here. So there might be some speed bumps with a rookie quarterback. But I think anytime you can draft a wide receiver as your wide receiver 3 or wide receiver 4 that you can pencil in for 120 plus targets and then still has the unknown upside with Jaden Daniels, I think that's a pretty sound investment to make in drafts. So um, I haven't been in on Jahan Dotson or Luke McCaffrey. I think the only receiver I really am interested in is in Washington is McLaurin, assuming I can get him in round 5 or 6, not in round 4.
Yeah, I think I'm with you on that. I don't know that I'm really going to be actively targeting anyone from this Commanders offense except for Jaden Daniels if I'm going with a late round quarterback, or Brian Robinson, who I still think is a fantastic value at running back as well, who can, plug into a running back 2 spot. So Dave, there we go. We did it. 32 teams, 32 players. I think we did a little bit more than 32 players, but 32 teams at least, and the top headlines from their training camp. As always, want to remind you guys, make sure you're subscribed to the channel here. Make sure you're subscribed to the Football Guys daily news update. It's going to give you everything you need to stay up to date on all the news in the NFL and throughout training camp. We've also got Bob Harris doing a great job with the new daily news updates. Make sure you are subscribed to the Football Guys Audible channel on YouTube and on podcast form, where Bob is going to be giving you those updates every single day. Thank you guys so much. For myself, for Dave, we want to thank you for watching and listening all the way through. We'll see you next time. Adios.